Chapter 1 of Alice in Wonderland. Down the rabbit hole. This expression is actually really kind of an important expression. So I'm going to actually write it. And if you have a reading journal, you might want to write it too. And I'll explain why in a moment. So down the rabbit hole. Does anybody know what it means when we say to go down the rabbit hole? I mean, of course, you might have an actual rabbit outside and the rabbit actually, goes inside a hole or something in the ground. Okay, that's pretty literal. But to go down the rabbit hole is a really interesting saying. And it means to go someplace where there's stuff you can't control and things maybe you weren't expecting. And I'll say that again. So it means to go someplace. Where there's things. And actually I should say where there are things. But speaking, I just say there's things. Where there are things you can't control, and stuff where there are things you can't control and stuff you weren't or aren't expecting. That's what it means to go down the rabbit hole. So you can go down the rabbit hole in many ways. One way to go down a rabbit hole is to, let's say, ask some questions about something, right? Maybe you want to figure out how something's happening or why something's happening in your life. Okay, so if you want to figure those things out, you have to start asking questions. But when you start asking questions, you might not get the answers that you expect or that you want, and that takes you on a path that we would call down the rabbit hole. Down the rabbit hole is not necessarily a bad thing, but it can lead you to some unexpected places. And if you are, if you're going down the rabbit hole, if you're asking questions about stuff, whether to gain deeper understanding or whether because you think something's not right and you want to, fight for what's right, you may end up, even without knowing it, just going down the rabbit hole. And in this story, the first chapter is called Down the Rabbit Hole. And when we read this, you'll see why it's called Down the Rabbit Hole. In Alice's case, it's a very literal hole that she goes down. But you'll see she meets up with stuff she doesn't expect or anticipate, or nor could she. And what happens to her in this story? It's a fantasy story, right? I wrote in my notebook here that the genre is fantasy, so it's not actually going to happen, to us. But the idea of going down the rabbit hole, to a place we can't control, things we don't expect, is very relevant in 2020. Once the pandemic hit, I think it took the world down the rabbit hole. That's my own take on it. And, we're all sort of coping with that reality right now and trying to figure out what does it look like to move through the rabbit hole, and how can we come back to some sense of normalcy. But 2020, really, with everything that it's come with, most especially the pandemic, I would say is an apt analogy for going down the rabbit hole. We certainly didn't plan it. We definitely can't control it. And we have no idea what to expect on any given day. We're learning, we're working with it. Things are changing like crazy. As you'll see, happens also in Alice in Wonderland. So that's my introduction to chapter 1 in Alice in Wonderland, Down the Rabbit Hole.